welcome back to another episode of Elevated Chat Room. Elevate your mind, elevate your life. Your boy is back. I was out last week. My son ended up having a game on the nights that we normally shoot. But I'm back, and I got a special guest with me. Before I introduce her, let me tell you what the topic is. The topic for tonight is the road to resilience. We got Dr. Kimberly Jackson with us tonight. She is 2023 Show's Woman of the Year and so much more. I'm going to let her introduce herself a little bit more. Talk to him.
Okay. So I am Dr. Kimberly Jackson. And like he said, I was selected to be 2023 Show's Woman of the Year.
Well deserved.
I also, my number one priority in claim to fame is I'm a mom of three. My oldest two are 20 and my baby is 4. And then I run my own nonprofit, Crossroads Community Outreach, that service low income and homeless people here in the area. And I also work for the executive team for Walgreens. So just thankful to be here and glad you guys invited me. So I'm looking forward to chopping it up with you.
I appreciate you coming through. We appreciate you coming through.
More than welcome.
Sometimes you're afraid to ask people to come on because like their status or their name and the stuff that they're doing is like, will they turn us down? You know what I'm saying? But I feel like we kind of built enough rapport to it's like, you know what? Let's get her on. Let's see if she's interested because your story is amazing. And we're going to get into that. But before we go into that, you said something about Crossroads and the homeless. Like what exactly is that?
Okay, so Crossroads is a baby of mine. It is my nonprofit that I founded. I was working my way up the corporate ladder, like most people do. You graduate from college and you're trying to do your thing to try to establish yourself. And right in the midst of that, I got arrested by God back in 2015. Working my job, I had just got a promotion, just got the office that I wanted, and all of a sudden God said, I want you to do a new thing with you. And so it ended up taking me into a totally different direction. I'm by trade a human resources administrator. And so that just took on a life of its own, but I knew what God was calling me to do. And I had never done it before. I'm not a social worker by trade. But he was so specific in what he was calling me to do. And so I ended up turning in my 2 weeks notice back in 2015. And I remember driving home. I worked up in Cortland at Sequel. And I just remember driving home. And I thought to myself, God, I'm either trusting you and this is the biggest walk of faith I've ever had, or I've made the biggest mistake of my life because I had, small kids at the time. And so I just remember God asking me at that moment, do you trust me? And I thought, yeah, God, I was just like, oh Lord, I trust you. I got you. And he was like, I need to know, do you really trust me? And I just, at that moment, it's like the Holy Spirit just kind of accosted me. And I remember pulling over into the subway station there and just kind of sitting with God for a minute. And he was like, it's like he really wanted to make sure that I understood what I was committing to. That this wasn't just signing up for another job. Like, I'm asking you to do something different. This is a new thing. And so I could hear the Holy Spirit asking me, will you trust me when your checks doesn't come in the next 2 weeks? Like, I need that level of trust from you. And I immediately said, Lord, I'll do it. I'll trust you. I'll do whatever it is that you're asking me to do. And immediately when I said that, I could hear the Holy Spirit telling me, you say that now, but you don't have the level of faith that you need in order to do what I'm calling you to do, but I'll get you there. And so at that moment, back in 2015, I made a commitment to God that, no matter what, because I knew what he asked me up front, that can you do this without the money? Like, can you do this if you're not getting paid for this, if the money is not rolling in? So I knew. And so fast forward to now, when I'm talking to my board members, I know what I asked God and I know what God promised me, that if I stepped out on faith and to do this, that he had my back no matter if I had funding, donors. And so it's a different level of faith walking when you're walking that way, knowing that this is something that is ordained by God, that no matter what the challenges may appear in the flesh, that God's got it.
Yeah.
So I
like
walk a little
God's-
different.
So it's more like God's will
Yes.
that He allowed to work through
Yes.
the instrument.
So I don't have a choice. So, people, when they get, you have a job, when you're called into ministry, I do a lot of consulting work with people who want to start nonprofits. And what I'm clear to them on all the time, when you're trying to start a ministry, is not a nonprofit. So it's a totally different calling on you, and they're run similar. So in the secular world, they appear to be the same thing. And a lot of times, us that run nonprofits get kind of caught up in, the funding and the grants and the competitiveness of it. But those of us that have been called by God into ministry, and it looks similar, the way they're set up looks similar. But those of us that have been called by God know that there's something different, that you're answering to a different authority. So, there's been opportunities that have come my way that said, oh, we'll give you money for this. And God has said no. Yeah, I had to go back to my board and I prayed about it, and God, and they're like, in the natural, it's a good opportunity. It looks good. But when you're walking by faith and you're doing something and you're running a ministry that God has called you into, there's a different type of authority. And so those of us that have been called into that as a founder of that, in the back of your mind that at some point you're going to have to go in a different direction. You may not be able to do it like people traditionally do it. You got to answer to God in the way that you handle that nonprofit. So ministry looks totally different. And so I walk that out. It's just a faith walk, and I never know how God's going to work things out, but I know that He will.
Yeah. So He's been faithful the whole time.
Yes.
See, and that's what's so amazing. It's like He had to get you up to another level.
Yes.
So that you would understand, like, look, like I got you. Like
Yes.
God is like, I got
Yes.
you. But it may not look the way you
Yes.
look at all times.
Yes.
When it's all said and done, I got you.
Yes.
You said some things when you said about your faith. God said your faith is not where I needed for it to be.
Yes.
And was that not kind of scary?
It was very scary,
Like-
but it was very scary, but I heard Him.
Yeah.
So if you've ever heard from God, you know that it's Him.
Mhm.
And so it's almost like that authority is if you were sitting there and your wife called you to the kitchen and said, hey, honey, I need you to do such and such and such. It's that type of hearing. It's a totally, you understood what the assignment is, And so I heard what He said. And so when I committed to that and said, okay, I'll do this. And He says back to me, you don't have the level of faith to really raise your hand to say you can do this, but I'm going to get you there. And so what happened over that course of that next year, He took me through some stuff. And so, going through, finances and just up and down until He had literally perfected me in that area of trusting Him. And it's a different level of trust when bills are coming in and you're like, okay, God, you told me to quit that job and I don't have no money coming in. Like, what are we going to do about this? And watching Him do it. It's a different level of faith. And so the first couple of times, because we're still, we're still flesh.
Mhm.
So the first couple of times, I'm scrambling. I'm like, oh, I need to call and make a payment arrangement. And I could hear the Holy Spirit say, I don't need an arrangement. I got this. I literally got this. And I would have people just call and say, we want to partner with you. We want to donate to this. We want to hang you something. We want to make sure you're good. Have you eaten today? And so God just worked it out. And so by the time I got to my second and third year of doing this, it was just a level of knowing. So when we started out my nonprofit, we were literally, me and my kids working out of my car. I didn't have a building. I didn't have, I did not have nothing. I did not have anything. I just knew what God told me to do.
Yeah.
And so I just remember before I quit my job, Pastor Davidson, Green Davidson IV, is a dear friend of mine. He was working at the same job. And I just remember when I turned in my notice, they thought, oh, she's getting ready to graduate her doctorate. She's found another job. And I'm thinking, I don't have another job. Like, God told me to do this. And I just remember feeling so foolish, but I remember going into my office. That's why you have to be connected to other people of faith. I remember going into my office thinking, oh my God, this is so foolish. But I remember him coming into my office and just sitting there looking at me. And he said, I admire you for the level of faith that you have.
That's some faith.
And he told me, he said, God told me to do the exact same thing and I didn't do it. And he literally, right after I left, he left quickly after. And so you never know who's watching you and your faith walk, because just my act of faith of saying, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I knew that he was connected enough that when I said, God told me to do this, he knew what that meant. That when God tells you and he gives you orders to do a certain thing, you don't really have a choice in the matter, and you can run from it and do some other stuff. And I could easily have gotten my doctorates and gone on to do whatever it is that I wanted to do with that. But that calling was still there. So it was still that tapping on the shoulder of, this is what I'm wanting you to do. And I remember asking God, when he laid it out to me, exactly, the homeless population and work with people that, didn't have food. I'm thinking, I don't know how to do any of this. And he said, I know you don't, but I'm going to send the people that do know how to do it.
How amazing
And
is that?
yeah, and I'm sitting there thinking,
Like,
I'm like, even down to the colors that he wanted me to use. And the other thing that he asked me, he was so clear about, is being transparent. Which was hard for me, because when you're trying to build yourself up and your reputation up, you want to kind of keep some things private, where you're like, I don't really want to share that part of my journey. I want to tell the part where I got through it.
Yeah.
So God has been very, he's always nudges me to tell it. Like, you got to tell it the way that it happened. So, a lot of times when I'm going through a struggle, I know that people are watching and they see you roll out and they see you polished with your kids and stuff, and everything looks great, but they don't get to see the side where you're struggling, or you're crying, or you're not sure, or you're battling anxiety or depression. And people need to see that other side, that you just roll out and become Show's Woman of the Year. There were some trials and tribulations that got you there. And I think it's a disservice, especially to younger people that are coming behind me, to not share that part of the story. You can't just say, well, I'm Show's Woman of the Year and I roll down and it's all pictures and great. There's a struggle to that.
I agree. And that's one thing we always say: people see your glory.
Yes.
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 We say it all the time.
Yes.
You can see somebody. Like, I'm not impressed.
Yes.
More so the fact that you are like here.
Yes.
I'm more so impressed about how you went from here.
Yes.
To here.
And how you got there. Yes.
Tell me the up.
And it wasn't just, and a lot of people try to glass over their rags to riches stories, like, oh, I came from the bottom and now I'm here. It happened for Drake that way, but it didn't quite happen. I didn't start from the bottom and get there. Yeah. It was a process. Yeah. And so a lot of people don't want to talk about, how they went, for periods of time and didn't have anything to eat. So I think when you share that level of your truth, I think it causes people not to begrudge you of where you are, because sometimes it's easy to see somebody where they are and think, I come here and be like, oh, it's so nice in here, but I don't see what he had to go through to get to this point. You know what I'm saying? When it wasn't here, when this wasn't here, when this was just something that they were believing God for. That's what I'm saying. It's just a thought and an idea. Or even God saying, hey, this is what I want you to do. And you're like, that's impossible. I know I'm not going to, not me. Like, you start in your mind, you start naming out, well, I know they're probably going to let so-and-so do this, because definitely not me. Mm-hmm. And when God calls you into something like that, you literally have to walk that thing out as if it's done. And it's hard to do that sometimes because you can't see it. You literally cannot see it, but you know that that's what he's called you to do. And you're like, okay, I'm going into this meeting, and this meeting is about $100,000. And you're thinking, I know this is going to be a denial. And when you walk out, that's what increases your faith, because when you go into that room with that confidence, because you know God sent you. So when you go in and you sit there and you're thinking, I cannot believe, like, it wows you. You're thinking, I cannot believe they gave this to me. Like, what?
Something of that nature. So you know that it's not you.
Yes.
You know that it's bigger than you. It has to be God.
Yes. It can't be you.
Like, you come into a position as you're not qualified.
Yes.
Yes. And God was like, that's fine.
Yes. He doesn't need any of that.
To you. I'm going to work my will through you.
Yes.
I'm going to make sure you're connected. I'm going to make sure you have the resources.
Yes.
So like you said, though, that builds your faith. That builds your confidence in God.
Yes.
So now it almost goes from faith to just trust.
Yes.
Like, I
know. Yeah, you just, you do. It's just, it literally is a sense of ease when you realize that God's got it. Like, and people are like, aren't you stressed about that? Or aren't you worried about that? You're like, no, because I know I've seen him do the impossible.
So speaking of the impossible, let me ask you this. This question right here says, what does resilience mean to you, and how has it shaped your journey? You kind of started talking about some things. So what does resilience mean to you, and how has it shaped your journey?
Resilience means to me is just standing on my faith, just knowing that God is going to work it out.
Mm.
That's where my resilience comes from, because I just have a knowing that He's going to do it. And that's unshakable. I've seen Him do it so many times before when I thought this is never going to work out. It's not going to, I can't see it working out for my good. The deck is stacked against me. It's just no way this is going to work out. And over time, when you continue to just rely, and you get to a point in your faith walk where all you have is God to rely on. And a lot of times when you're called into that, other people, even people that are close to you, don't necessarily understand your calling. So they will try to talk you out. They'll say, man, let's just try something else. We done tried this 1,000 times. You'll have board members. That's why I said you can't, you structure it like a nonprofit. But when you're working as a ministry and you've been called to that level of ministry, there's a part of you that walks out of a board meeting that the board has said, the numbers are not, the math ain't mathing. This is not, you've done a feasibility, study to see if it's going to work out, where you're going to put the location is not a good location, and nothing seems to, on paper, appear to be how it's going to work itself out. Your resilience comes when you can rely on that faith, knowing that, you can, with 100% assurance, tell your board members and people that are sponsoring you, I know I know it doesn't look like it's going to. But in your mind, you've heard from God.
Well, that's all you need.
That's all you need.
If you are a true believer, it's kind of like a son or a daughter with their mom or their dad.
Yes.
And their parents tell them, "I got you," or
yes.
"I'll come through." They may not say how I'm gonna come through.
Yes.
It's kind of like when me and my wife got married. Like her dad, my wife's oldest sister had just got married the year before. So. Boom, I proposed, we get married the next year. And he was like, well, I got y'all too.
Right.
We was like, you sure? He was like, yeah.
Yeah.
But stuff starting to come due, and it's like,
yeah,
no, you ain't coming through.
Yeah.
And then by the time the wedding was here, it was all taken care of.
Yeah.
We don't really know how.
But it was worked out.
It came
yes.
through. So it's like, when God give you His word,
yes,
stand on it.
You can stand on that.
Even if you don't understand it.
Yes.
And that's what's so powerful about it.
And you have to be able to trust God. It has to be a knowing inside of you that's so concrete that you cannot be so moved by things that you hear or anything that you feel. You can't go off of your emotions or paperwork that you see, or you start getting stuff in, like I said, your board members come and you have people that are on your board that doesn't kind of understand your faith walk, and so they're like, we've done a study on this, and this is there, that level of faith that you have to have, that even if it doesn't look like it, even if in my own fleshly feelings I feel like this is probably not going to work itself out, there's a deep knowing in me that it's going to work out simply because God said it would.
And see, that's another thing. Some people start to do things when they haven't heard
yes.
God.
Yes.
And it could be a godly thing.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that God actually calls you to do that thing.
Yes.
And so those people, it's a whole lot harder.
Yes.
Because it's like, well,
I
didn't tell you to do it.
Yes.
I'm going to give you grace to get
yes.
But you're going to have to go through a whole lot.
You're going to have to go through a whole lot. Yes.
I want it.
Yes.
For your life.
Yes.
What I want you to do through me.
Yes.
There were some things that you said, and it took me back to, I heard this guy, he was talking about faith versus feedback.
Yes.
And I like to say faith versus facts.
Yes.
Because even though the facts may say that but facts can change.
Facts can change.
So the facts are not the truth.
Yes.
They're not set in stone.
Right.
Because I can go to a baseball game and watch my son, one of my boys hit, and they can go 4 for 4 with a 1,000 batting average.
Yes.
But guess what? That may be fact for the day.
Yes.
But tomorrow they're gonna come back and they may go 2 for 4 or 0 for 4. Yes. Now you batting, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So fact may have been, you was batting 1,000, but now you batting.
Yes.
So
yes.
Change.
Yes.
So you have to stand on truth.
Yes.
I like that. Let me ask you this. It says, what was the most challenging moment you had to overcome, and how did you push through? So what was the most challenging thing that you can think of? Gosh. And I kind of got an idea what you may go, but you done been through a lot.
Oh, man.
You may surprise.
I think, I thought when I got diagnosed with cancer back May of this year. And I thought at that moment that was probably the most challenging until I lost my mom 2 months later. And so I still, this is the thing, I still had that same, that's the thing about ministry. When regular life stuff happens to you, it doesn't excuse you from your calling.
Come on.
You're
That's good.
I'm still, so people was calling me, they was like, they had counted me today, they was like, oh, Crossroads is gone, they ain't gonna be operating because she's sick. I had people, some of my sponsors calling, it was like, people was like, because people in this area are really big about, trying to get sponsors and that kind of stuff. So I had people calling, like, oh, Crossroads is, you don't have to worry about them getting the donations because, she's sick and her mom just passed and, she's not coming on. But what they don't understand about that level of ministry is that God doesn't give you an out. Like, you don't get to just not do it no more because life happens.
Come on.
You just can't just check out. And I remember going to God and like, God, I'm going through this is too much. Like, can you just let this be the time where you just give me some grace and let me just bow? And he was like, no, because when I called you to this, I knew that this was going to happen. Nothing comes as a surprise to God. So God wasn't surprised that my mom was going to pass. It didn't catch him by surprise that I got cancer and my mom died 2 months. And he already knew that. He knew that when he called me, because he called me prior to this happening. So, I knew at that time, I'm like, I've got to keep this going. And so at that time, you know, with my mom passing, I think it's probably the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with. And I would say not even deal with, to overcome, because it's an overcoming, because it's an ever changing process and it's a day-to-day thing that you're going through. So it's not something that you just overcoming and you just move on. This is something that you just deal with on a day-to-day. But I knew that my mom knew the Lord, and I knew that in order to honor her, I needed to honor God, because that's what my mom lived, honoring God. She lived not making excuses. So I thought my mom would never want, if she even knew that I was in my car crying and even thinking about not doing this anymore, it would be a disservice to her, because that is not the seed that she even planted in me. You got to keep going. Like, you cannot fold just because life happens, and you need to have good resources, stay connected to good people that are plugged in. And that's the other thing, when you get unplugged. So when life happens like that, you just find yourself kind of unplugged. Like, you're like, and I hit that space where I was just kind of in a dark place where I just was like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm gonna get past this. And you have to, at those moments when you're not able to kind of get your plug into the source, to be connected to other people that are already plugged in and say, I got you. I'm praying for you. I got you. It's going to be okay. And every day, hearing that, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. So you got to have a good connection with people that are connected, that are plugged into the source.
I've always wondered, when like a death happens of that level.
Yes.
Like, how people overcome that's not connected to God or Christ. Like, I don't
know.
Like, even with just life in general, like with the things that just happen.
I just don't know. I don't know mentally. If I didn't have a relationship with Christ, I don't know mentally if I would have been able to sustain a diagnosis and then a death of that magnitude back to back and still be sitting here today to be able to tell my story. I just don't think so. Because
I don't think so either.
No, because it's the thing about having a relationship with Christ is that after all the lights and stuff are down, and even when you're by yourself, because there's a part of life where even if you have a spouse or kids or other people, there's a portion of your life where it's just you and God.
Yes.
Where you got to just go to God by yourself. Your spouse ain't going to get it. Your kids ain't going to get it. Your mentor ain't going to get it. It's just you. It's raw. It's just you and God. It's just you and God, where you're saying, God, I don't know about this. I don't know if I can continue to do this. And in those very raw, intimate moments that you have with God, it's just kind of a game changer where, in my mind, I always think of the story of Paul when he got his name changed. And I think it's those pivotal moments in life where he kind of meets you on that road of Damascus, where he just kind of strikes you down and something happens to you and you never come out the same. Like you come out of it different.
Yes.
And so even though your actual name doesn't change, there's a difference. There's a difference about you when you come out of those type of situations and those trials that just builds your faith, because you know at that moment that there was a changing that happened with you and only God did it.
And you can sense it, you can
Yes.
feel it,
Yes.
and it shifts your
It
whole
shifts
like
you. Yes.
whole like person. Everything
changes you.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
It's like you walk different.
You do.
And it like I say, it's like the highest level of confidence
Yes.
that you can have, even though, cause like even in like relationships and marriage, when you go through the hard times, you sit down, you have those deep, hard, tough
Yes.
conversations.
Yes.
Don't want to do it, but you got to do it. And once you have it, it's like boom, we went to another level.
Yes.
And you can feel it in the relationship.
feel
Like
it.
man,
We made it through
yeah,
that.
we
Yes.
went to another level with this thing. I had a new level of trust with you. Some of the things that you said is just like a lot of this stuff is just so powerful. Your story is powerful just in the faith portion alone.
Yes.
You think, or you would think, that as God is building your faith for the nonprofit, He's actually building it for your life.
Yes.
It's not tailored to just this nonprofit.
No, they're one and the same. They're one and the
Because it's
same.
like if I can build you up,
Yes.
have confidence and
Yes.
faith in this, then when life hits, you know, outside of nonprofits, like look, God, He didn't already came through so many times with this nonprofit stuff. So why not trust Him with my relationship?
Yeah.
Why not trust Him with, you know, my thought life? Why
You
not?
gotta trust him with. You gotta literally trust him with every single thing. Like I've seen him do things that I just thought, oh my God, like I just, I've seen him do miraculous things over and over and over and over and over again, to the point now, when I talk to people about faith, I'm like, and one of the things I'll go back to, what one of the things I was talking about when I came off my job, I had just finished up my doctorate degree and was getting ready to graduate. And that was one of the things that, because I was like, okay, I'm on my road to success. I'm going to be able to go up the ladder now. I've got my credentials. And God said to me, in the middle of me praying through that time, He said, I'm going to give you, just as a bonus, because this is not what I'm calling you into, but as a bonus, just for you, it's almost like the icing on the cake. Like I'm just going to give this to you like a parent would give candy to a child. I'm going to give you this doctorate because I know this is something in the flesh that you want, but you don't need this to do what I'm calling you to do. But this is what he asked me specifically to promise him. He said to me, this degree and credential will get you into rooms that you would not previously been invited into, just because some people are just big on titles.
Yes.
So it'll get you into a room. But when you get in that room, I need you to let them know that I sent you. I don't care who you're talking to. I don't care if it's the president of the United States. I don't care what room it's in. I don't care how carnal that room is.
Yes.
You need to be clear that I sent you, that you're not there as Dr. Jackson, and that you're not, has nothing to do with your degree or anything that you've earned, or that you're so great or nothing like that, or that you can speak, or, that you're only here because I sent you. And so I had to be clear when I go into any meeting and stuff, and I'm like, when they're trying to lean towards something more secular, and I'm like, I can hear the Holy Spirit like, you better let them know. You better let the people know who sent you. Don't be fooled into thinking, because sometimes you can get so caught up in credentials and people singing your praises in the natural that you forget that God, and anytime I get off on that path, is just hell to pay. Like when you get off into that, I'm Dr. Jackson. That's why when we won Show's Woman of the Year, we were sitting there, when they called my name, we didn't even move, because we didn't go in thinking we were going to win. Because I always try to, I know that God sent me to do what He called me to do. So we just go in, and so when they call my name, we just sitting there, and my cousin was like, I think they called your name. We sat there for the longest just waiting, and she was like, yeah, I think they called your name, because I know who sent me. So we don't, it's just not about you just get you elevate past that, and the accolades are good. It brings a lot of attention to your nonprofit and that kind of stuff, but there comes a level of faith that you get to, in this walk, when you're called by God, that you know that you don't need it. I used to be big on, when I first started, my board was like, oh, we need to get as much press coverage as we need to get. You need to, we need to get these, we need to get it out there in the community. And the Holy Spirit would always say, the people that need this will get it.
Come on. Come on.
We've never had anything that the people that really didn't need it, they're going to get it. Even if it's just one. So don't get so caught up on having 1,000 people there and packing rooms, because you're trying to reach the one. So you're not trying to please a crowd. So don't get so caught up in, oh my God, the room was packed, how many people you had, because we want to produce numbers. You especially when you start dealing with nonprofits, and even in churches. So everybody, and so we became, and that was a pivotal moment in our nonprofit, when our funding got pulled by the city, which I felt like at the time was so devastating. But this is what God, taught me in that moment, because we had gotten so caught up in being a nonprofit and a slave to numbers. Like, you got to have 55 homeless people that you saw today.
Talk to
you got to, if you go in there, you got to give to every person a pamphlet, and everybody got to sign off on this. And we were missing the ministry. The ministry part, because we were so caught up in trying to be compliant with a grant and what the stipulation was from the government, that I lost sight that I was answering to God. And so at some point I'm thinking, oh my God, we're chasing. I could literally feel myself in the natural chasing behind that grant, because it was a huge grant. We're like, oh, we got to keep this. But what I didn't realize at the time is that it wasn't God. Like, God had already left it, and I was still chasing it. So when he pulled it, I remember specifically praying to God, like, God, they done took this grant. We got to get this back. And he was like, they didn't take it. I took it. I didn't give it to you. You applied for it and earned it in the natural. I didn't ordain it, and I didn't give it to you. And you were chasing that, and I took it. Because I was like, oh, I'm like, I need to meet with it. We were meeting with everybody. They were going to pay. They need to tell us some answers, get us some answers. And when God literally spoke to me and said, it's not this person or that person, it was ordained by me.
Come on.
Like, it's not, Dwayne didn't take this, or Alonzo didn't take this. These are people that's working in different offices. They had no control over it. It was ordained by me. I took this because it was not a part of my will. And you were going to, if you had stayed on that track, you would have been forever chasing the next dollar. And you would have thought that was your source. I'm your source.
Come on. That's good.
And I can do the ministry through you that I want you to do, whether you have $1 million grant or whether or not you're still working out your car and you have nothing. And I've seen God do it before. We were able to get as a matter of fact, we were getting more people off the street and into housing when I had nothing, working out of my car with just me and my 2 kids. And I was under less stress because the anointing was on me and I was following God than I did when I was contracted with the city and was chasing the dollar.
That's good.
Because of public perception, because the public wants to think, oh, they got they killing it. We fall into that trap. So my pride was saying, you gotta this is my pride. I told the board, we were just fighting. We were like, we gotta get this money back. We gotta go down here. No, I'm serious. I'm being as transparent. We had lawyered up. We were gonna fight them. And Wesley Thompson, he'll attest to it. He's one of my board members, and he's, of course, he's a pastor. And I just remember we had lawyered up. We were like, we're gonna go to war. We're gonna get this back. And I just remember when God said, if you step into this ring, you're gonna lose. And I just remember him hearing it so clear. I was taking a shower and I was like, what? Because I'm like, I know God want me to fight to get this back. And he was like, if you step into this ring and fight this battle, you're going to lose because I'm not a part of this. And I remember calling Wesley on the phone because we were scheduled for a board meeting, and I said, we got to call all this off because we were like, oh, we're going to call the press. We're going down there. We need to talk to somebody. We just going to go to war. And I just remember clearly God said, no, you're not. You're not going to do, as a matter of fact, you're not going to do none of that. And I'm like, what my character? What are people going to think? What are they going to be saying? Like, I need it. And he was like, I will defend you. You let me do what I do and you do what I called you to do. I never asked, and God was asking me, he was like, when did I ever ask you to defend yourself? When? You didn't consult with me on any of this. On any of it. I'm talking about we had gone off into a tangent of we're going to do this.
Yeah.
So when I remember calling Wesley and I was like, yeah, we're going to call off all of this. Like none of this, we're not going to be able to do. And he was like, well, we need to. And I was like, we can't do anything. If we take this posture that we're in right now, where we got the gloves up and we're in boxing mode, we're out of God's will and he can't bless us.
Let's say that again.
We're out of God's will and he was not going to bless it. Which means the anointing would have been pulled off, and whatever we would have walked into, whatever meetings, you're on your own.
That's good.
And he had already told me. I told him, I said, he specifically told me you're going to lose. If you go into this boxing match with these people, you're guaranteed to lose. You got to concede.
You said one thing that prior that you was like, God was always had me to tell them when I walk in, I'm about my Father's business. And so that takes you back to Christ.
Yes.
Everything that he did, he always pointed to the Father.
Yes.
Which is a level of humility.
Yes.
It's like, no, this ain't me.
It's not me.
It's him.
It's him. It's all him.
I point to him.
It's all
and as long as you continue to point to him,
yes,
everything will be, as it's supposed to be.
Yes.
But when you started not pointing to him and trying to do your own thing, that's when he was like, look now.
You start having some problems.
There you
have
go.
a lot of problems.
He still
and it may not. And that's the thing. The devil will trick you because it may not even show up because the devil loves to play tricks with us. So he will give you something that appears like success. So he will get you a grand or something else and you'll get something, in the natural. But what he will do is, and what God will let you know that you're outside of his will, it'll start affecting your marriage, your relationship with your kids. You know what I'm saying? You're thinking, dang, what's going on in my household? Like I'm married to these kids and like I'm coming home and it's total chaos. Like what is really going on? Like God, I literally just ministered and mentored to 10 or 15 kids, or I just went out here and helped these people and I come home and all hell's breaking loose. That's because the devil will trick you to make you think that what you're doing is in God's will. So those are times when you have to really check to see, am I really doing what God has called me to do? Because what I'm doing appears to be successful by all standards. But on the other side, I don't really feel like I'm making an impact as far as ministry. And so you have to really go back to the very beginnings and go back and talk to God and ask him, is this your will? And sometimes we forget that. We get in the planning phases.
You can see the dollar signs. You can see different things to the success and everything. Because I've had conversations with men that would take jobs. That'll pull them away from their family. They're making way more money. But your relationship with your kids is now strained. Your relationship with your spouse,
get that back.
You
cannot get that back.
My wife has talked about a couple times taking jobs at the Calhoun Community College of Decatur. And then I was like, we come to agreements like if it's gonna pull you away from the family, then it's not what's needed. Because I'm big on family. Everything comes second to that.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if I got an opportunity to go do this, that. I'm like, no, like if it's gonna put a strain.
It's hard to turn that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's hard to turn that kind of stuff down.
But when you're not motivated by those things, like would it be great to make more money? Of course it would be.
Yes.
But not at the extent that when I come home, my sons don't know me the way they know me now.
And the thing about it is we're all in different places in our ministry. And God called us all to do different things. So a lot of times you'll talk to somebody that's in a different place in their ministry. And so they're like, oh, yeah, you can do this, that, and the other. But you're like, I'm not. And your level of faith may not be where that other person's is.
That's true.
So you're like, no, I really need to be. If that person has, especially if you're married and you're in covenant, and y'all have already, like you talked about, you have already gotten to a different level with your spouse where it's like, okay, we've overcome all these obstacles. What you don't understand is when you're talking to somebody that is maybe newly married or having or going through those situations and haven't come out on the other side, when you're saying, "Oh, well, just leave your house because you and your spouse good because y'all done been through the trials and tribulations." So when you ask somebody, to say, "Okay, in the name of ministry, I want you to kind of leave your wife and kids at home and come go with me," they may not be in the same space or place you are as far as your ministry, and so we have to be careful of that too when we're asking other people to commit to something that we have a level of faith for that they're not there yet. Doesn't mean that they're not committed to ministry. They're just not there yet. And you have to, when I first started, it's no way what I started off doing, I would be able, what I'm doing now, I would be able to do when I first started.
Right.
I didn't have the level of faith to be able to do it. Like I just didn't. So, my finances, and how to work that, what that looked like, when God is saying, sow this seed or plant this seed or do this thing. When you're asking somebody else, where I am right now, to ask somebody else that, and a lot of people will do that. They're like, "Oh, I'm going to do it exactly how you do it. So I'm going to take my whole paycheck and I'm just going to sow into it. I'm going to start me a nonprofit." You better make sure that God has told you to do
Right.
what you're supposed to do. And so you got to make sure. So that's why I always try to be transparent about my journey. Because I'm like, when I first started off, I wasn't able to do it that way because I didn't have that level of faith. I didn't know what was going to happen, with small kids if I, sold my whole, because you get in the kind of that spirit of everybody doing it. So you get up and Dwayne say, "Oh, I'm going to donate my whole check." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to donate my whole check too." You know what I'm saying? And then I walk out thinking, "Oh my God, I done gave the folks all, yeah, you gotta, yeah." And he was like, that's what I'm saying. And he looking at me like, I called Dwayne to do that because he's on a different level. And he done sold a bunch of seeds and done without. You didn't realize I blessed him with the extra portion of blessing because he made a sacrifice 10 years ago, and this is what I'm giving back to him. So now he has it to give. You're not there. You have to do it the way God has called you to do it, because you will end up in a world of trouble trying to follow. That's why, like I said, I'm always careful when people call me and they're like, "Oh, I want to start a nonprofit." But then they tell me they want to start it in the name of Jesus. I'm like, okay, well, this is not going to look the same as somebody that's starting a traditional nonprofit. Like, this is not, you're going to do your regular paperwork, you know what I'm saying? Like, like you do to set your nonprofit up. But there's a part of that when you get ready, even how you choose your board members, how you choose your volunteers is going to look different. You're not going to just say, "Oh, everybody get their volunteers from this particular place." If God says, "I don't want you using that they're doing some things over there that I'm just really trying to take you in a different direction," you can't just go with the crowd. You can't just, here in this area is really hard because certain things are popular. So everybody's doing it. Everybody's getting their volunteers for a certain place, or everybody's going to this certain thing. And you have to be able to take a stand and say, we're going to do something different. We're just not going to do it that way. And you have to be able to trust God that He'll do it. And He does it every single time. And so it just increases my faith when I watch other people that have stretched their faith, and I've watched their journey and watched them go through and watch how God blesses them. And I'm thinking, and I never feel the need to run and catch up. Like, I don't feel the need to like, "Oh, I need to run and catch up with them because they got this and I need to get it too." No, my time is coming, and it may not even look like that. You know what I'm saying? So you have to stay in a close relationship with God to try to figure out, where you are as far as your level of faith and what it is that He's asking you to do, and making sure, is this God's will? God, is this what you're wanting me to do? Because a lot of times we get caught up in natural things that's not a part of God's will. It's just not God's will.
And it also goes back to being content.
Yes.
In every state of life.
Yes.
Not necessarily that you're just overjoyed that everything is always going
Yes.
right, but just content, knowing
Yes.
that my strength is in the Lord, knowing
Yes.
that I'm not comparing, I'm not competing. What's for me is for me. If I'm
Yes.
not called to speak to millions, but I'm only called to speak to thousands, then dang on them thousands, they
That's
remember who I
exactly.
am.
Yes.
I'm gonna make the impact.
And sometimes it's just that one.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just, like I said, sometimes it can be the kid that walks up to you at church and say, "Hey, I want to know, can I pray with you or can I talk to you?" If you can just touch that one, and a lot of people want to be up in front. They want to be the one in front, like, and people People don't realize being in the front is not always that's not always it. So, they want to be the face. And I always tell my board, they'll tell you I rarely do a lot of I send my board members out because I don't ever want it to be about me. So, they're like, no, you need to go. And I have people that'll just be like, no, I just want to talk to you. And I'm like, so I have to be very prayerful about not getting into my own head to make things about me. So, if it's something that's dealing with, PR and, stuff like that, Jeffrey, it's on my board. I'll send him. He'll do a lot of PR stuff for me, and a lot of marketing and radio and that kind of stuff, because I just don't want it to ever the focal point to be on me.
I like that.
No, I don't. I don't ever want the focal point to be on me. I'm like, this is it's a team effort, and God gets the glory. And I'm like, if you put so much focus on one person, then you forget that it's about God. Yeah, you have to make sure that God gets the glory in that. Sometimes we can get caught up in wanting people on our board or volunteers that have connect. I used to get that all the time. People would always call me when I first started, like, oh, you need to get somebody on your board that's got a good connection. And I'm like, no, they need to be connected, but they need to be connected to the original source.
Come on.
Having connections out in the community is good and all of that, but you'll learn the more that you're doing this type of work and you've been called into it, especially when the bulk of it falls on you, that you really have to be very mindful about the people that you have to join you, because they will be praying to God just like you're praying to God. And so they will keep that mission and vision going, even if you're sick, you're out, or whatever. But when you get people just because it's the new great thing, when you get people volunteering and stuff because it's a fad and everybody's doing it and you made the paper and so they want to be a part of something, great. And you don't really consult with God about that, and you don't have people that are like-minded, that are God focused and centered, that are a part of what you're trying to do, you will struggle really hard to try to get your board and your volunteers to really understand where you're trying to go with this.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times people want it to be bigger and bigger and more money.
Yeah.
And so they lose sight of the vision and the mission of your organization, because in essence, the person that carries that weight, which I carry that weight with Crossroads, you want to be able to be out of pocket and somebody else be able to clearly articulate what it is that you do, how you do it, and why we're here. And so the only way that you're going to get that is to be able to be prayerful and get people that are, connected to your organization, that understands that it's a ministry and not just a nonprofit.
That's good.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna ask you this last question because we've been flowing. This will be the last one. Then you can kind of, if there's anything else you want to say, address them, we can do that. But my last question, because we've kind of pretty much covered pretty much almost everything that's on this on the list for tonight. But what advice would you give to someone that's struggling to find strength after a difficult experience? What advice would you give them?
Stay connected. When you hit those very dark places, where you just do not know which way to go, which way to turn, you need to already have a support system in place. And a lot of times people think that a support system comes from a spouse or family members or folks at your church. Your support system, that I've had to learn the hard way, your support system can be somebody, a person that you've never met at Walmart that can walk up to you and give you a word of encouragement. So you have to be open to God using different people to keep you connected. So that's my biggest thing, is just not allowing the enemy to get into your mind, because of course we know that the devil, the first place the devil gets us and how he binds us is through our mind. The word tells us that the only way that an enemy can come into a strong man's house and take him over, he first got to bind him. And the way he do it is in his mind, because he can't do it by his strength.
Right.
He can't do it with his strength. So you can have an army of people in your house, you can be strapped with guns, but if mentally that the devil can get into your head and bind you, he got you.
Gotcha. Oh yeah.
He got you.
All day, every day.
So he can't take him down by his physical strength, but if he can get into that strong man's head, he can take over his whole house. And that's the same thing true when you're going through a tough time. You got to be connected to some other people that says, "Man, we're gonna get up out of it. We're gonna get out of this. Since we're gonna pray our way through this." You got to stay connected to other people that when you're for whatever reason have come unplugged where life has just got you where you're like, I can't see it. Because I hit a place there, and like I said, I'm go to church, been in church, been saved, but when my mom passed, it just had me in a space where I'm just like, I'm just struggling. And you've got to really be connected to some people that when you, for whatever reason, either you pull the plug from God, like, I just can't do this, I can't hit a scripture, I can't hit a word. You've got to be connected to other people that are still plugged in, that are saying, I got you on this side, that you're going to be able to pull from their strength. And they may not be able to, they can't bring my mother back. There's not really any words that they can say, but being connected to somebody else that's connected, that says, I got you, I'm praying for you. And people that are earnestly praying for you can bring you out of a dark situation that you thought, I'm just never going to get out of this situation. And I think the other thing for me is, because of my faith, I've seen God do it over and over again. Like he just keeps doing it over and over and over and over again. And because I keep trusting him, so there was a part of me that said, if you can get out of this bed and if you can spiritually give this thing to God, and I know this is the toughest thing. I know you're trying to hold on to this thing. You just nursing it like, oh, my mama gone.
Yeah.
But if you can find the strength to give this to God the same way you've given everything else to him,
Come on, trust
he
me.
will do this the same way he's done everything else over and over again. And when I found the strength, and like I said, that strength came from other people saying, keep praying, I got you. Keep praying, I got you. Once I got to that point that I was able to give it to God and say, God, I've been wrestling for this. I cannot keep holding on to this. And I truly gave it to God. I saw him do what he's done, what he does the best is do it over and over again, where he just gave me the strength every day to just, like I said, it's one of those things where you don't just overcome that type of grief and loss. It's a process. It's an everyday thing that you learn because it's a new normal that you're having to go through. But just knowing that if God did it once,
Come on.
he'll do it again.
Gotcha. Oh, you like to go back and remember all the things basically that God, your faith journey, all
Yes.
the things he's come through for.
Yes.
Play that highlight reel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you do a highlight reel, you only show the good stuff.
Yes.
So it's like you have to go, when you're going through things, when you say they're just reminding, hey, play that highlight reel.
Mm-hmm.
Go back and just remember all the good stuff,
Yes.
that not only that God has done,
Mm-hmm.
but go back and play that highlight reel of the memories of your mother.
Yes.
Or that loved one that you
Yes.
lost. It's like, you know what, man, I had some great times with so-and-so.
Yes.
And, it'll go from tears of sadness to tears of joy.
And not only do I play my highlight reels, I play my losses too.
Mm.
So when I'm going over and I'm thinking about, when I'm playing my highlight reels, it's some tough times too. So I play it all out because in either time, God was there.
Mm-hmm.
So even in my worst moments where I thought I'm never, God always brings back to my remembrance. I always go back to a time where I thought I am never going to get through this. Like this is the most humiliating time or the worst time. And I'm looking 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And I'm like, I remember sitting there thinking, I'm never going to get through this. I remember when I graduated. And I remember when I was my freshman year down at Sanford, and I thought, oh my God, it was just so difficult down. I'm like, oh, I'm just never going to get through this. So when I got ready to walk across the stage, it was at that moment when I started thinking back at a time when I thought, I'm never going to be able to get through
But
this.
even in that, but even in what you just said, when you say you play the bad, but the bad always ended up
Yes.
with a good end.
Yes.
For the most part.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yes.
even when we playing, and we say that because, like you said, from the start, what conversation first started about how people don't understand everything you've been through. They just see
Yes.
where you at, like you got it made.
Yes.
You don't have no issues, no
Yes.
problems, none of that. But in essence, it's like, no, like I've been through some things. I can take you back to the dark days.
Yes.
But all my dark days ended with light.
Yes.
So that's just like, first off, I want to thank you for jumping
Oh,
on.
you're more than welcome.
You
Glad I
have
am so glad
dropped
to be here.
so much knowledge, so much wisdom,
Glad to be
and you've
here.
done it with passion and with no effort. It was just like it's just who you are. You can definitely
It's my
tell that
story.
what you're talking, what you're
That's what I told you. I
that's who
said,
you
I'm
are.
not going to look at no cloud. I'm like, I really did. I prayed and I was like, God, I just want this to be, I didn't want it to be a traditional speech where, you read your questions and you go over and you prepare. I'm like, I need this to be authentic because I feel like there's always somebody out there that's listening, that's going through something that thinks, oh, she just said it like that because she got a degree and they just, God can't hear me like that. God can't, I'm not eloquent in my speech. God can hear you no matter what. He doesn't care about your degrees and your accolades and all that kind of stuff and your credentials. He doesn't care about any of that. And so that's why I always try to be transparent with people. I'm like, he's not looking for that to use you. Like, you don't have to have a degree for God to use you. You don't.
You are so
You don't even have to speak. You don't even have, I mean, look at Moses and Aaron. You don't even have to be eloquent with speech for God to use you. He just wants you to be obedient. You just have to say yes. And he'll do all the rest of it. So, like I said, he'll open up rooms for you and doors for you that you thought, it's no way I'm going to get into this room because these doors are only open up for people like him or people like her. And God will open up a room and you're thinking, I cannot even believe that I'm even, like I said, that's exactly how it was. Like I said, at Shows One of the Year, we went there and we were just enamored by the gifts on the table. We were so busy looking at the gift baskets and stuff like that, and looking at my boys were like, oh, they were looking like, oh, it's a new coffee cup in here. We just we were so into the little simple stuff like, oh, you're gonna like this. It's a coffee cup in here. And I'm like, oh yeah, that is cute. That we weren't even thinking about because we have literally wired ourselves to just serve no matter what, like whether it's somebody's clapping, whether it's a lot of people show up, at all of our events that we have, because in addition to serving the homeless, we do our annual events. We do Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. And I always tell them, especially when we want to feed as if you want to act like the president is coming.
I like that.
You want to feed and you want to do it. And I'm like, you always want to do it because they were like, oh, we already know you're going to make us do such and such because you want to do it with a spirit of excellency. And it doesn't matter if one person shows up. I don't care. I'm not looking at the numbers. I don't care if 20 people show up or 2,000 show up. I'm going to serve those 20 people. And I don't care if those 20 people are from somewhere that you think, oh, it don't matter if we have to impress them. And you think, oh, if it's these people that show up that I got to try to put on the front. No, you want to serve every single person with the same level of respect. And you're going to have that same level of excellency, no matter who it is that you're serving or whoever it is. That's where your impact comes from because you want to keep that same level because you're doing it for God.
And see, that goes back, and I will close with it. That goes back to you and what you're doing. You're truly doing it to serve.
Yes.
You're doing
Yes.
things to serve.
Yes.
That is how you. That is how you.
Yes.
Move. That is how
Yes.
you operate. It's not about how great I am or the stage that I'm doing or how
No.
many people I'm reaching.
No.
It's about the simple fact that I'm being obedient
Mhm.
and I'm truly serving because I have a heart
Yes.
to give, to serve, and to sow. All right. Now we're gonna close this thing out, man. Dr. Kimberly Jackson came through, and I'm telling you, y'all, she dropped some knowledge on us tonight. Well, thank y'all for tuning in. Like, comment, share. Like I said, if you want to hop on, hey, you can holler at us. You know what I'm saying? But we out for the night. Thank you guys. Elevate your mind, elevate your life.